Hello there, one and all, and welcome to episode 295 of Love at First Scent with me, Persolaise, coming to you live from YouTube as always. But for this one, which is an interview one, I'm going to avoid a lengthy preamble before I introduce the guest, partly because he's actually no stranger to this channel. I'm sure a lot of you already know who he is, but also partly because I want to allow as much time as possible for the actual conversation. So we're just going to get straight into it. Without further ado, please give a warm welcome to the Creative Experience Officer, otherwise known as Creative Director to you and me, of Amouage, Renaud Salmon. Thank you very much for joining us, Renaud. How are you today?
Good. Hello, Darius. Hello, everyone. I'm in Muscat. It's raining today. First time in a while that I see rain in Muscat, and it's going well.
I love the fact that you just say, I'm in Muscat, it's raining today. But yeah, before we started, you told me that it was raining, and I thought, how ironic. I mean, not that the weather out here in the south of England is that much better. Yes, I now know where you are, because I was actually in that very space not that long ago, and it's your really beautiful, bespoke designed office at none other than the Amouage factory, which we say is in Muscat, but actually is just outside of Muscat, isn't it? It's in a place called Seed. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. So a few minutes away from the city center.
That's it. And I definitely want to talk about that setting at some stage, because it is a very, very special setting, and I think in many ways a very unique setting. Lots of people already tuning in. I have to say, because we always say who the first comment went to, the first comment today went to Claire, who said, hi, Persolaise and Perfume fans. Lots and lots of excitement about this. Just for the benefit of those of you either watching live or the recording, the plan is for this to be part one of a sort of special, epic, extended two-part interview, with part two we're thinking to be broadcast on Saturday the 16th of July, but we will confirm that nearer the time. I know that a lot of you have questions for Renaud. A lot of you have already sent in some questions for Renaud. If you're watching live, if you wouldn't mind just hanging on to the questions for the moment, because if you post them now, then I will miss them, but I will tell you when is a good time to go with the questions. Okay, I think I need to put things in a little bit of context. So, Renaud, it's been 2 years since you last appeared on this channel. And at that point, I believe you hadn't actually been in your post for a year yet. I think it was less than a year. That time, of course, 2 years ago was a strange time for everybody in the world. Most of us were still in lockdowns. It was a very, very uncertain time. But since then, thank goodness, things have changed a little bit. You have been extremely busy doing lots and lots of really quite varied things for the brand. And as I say, I've also had the opportunity and the privilege to observe firsthand some of the things that you do and some of the locations that are key to your work. And so, as they say, the more you know, the more you want to know. And because I had this insight into your world, and because I finally got to see the Amouage factory in Muscat, which was something I'd wanted to do for the longest time, I asked you if you would be kind enough to give us this special interview where we would hopefully get a chance to delve really, really deeply into the world of Amouage and find out more about what makes the brand so special, how you operate within its world, and to give you an opportunity to maybe talk about some of the things that you're not very often asked about, because people don't know that there are those things that it's possible for them to ask you about. So hopefully that is what we will achieve over the course of the next hour and in part two. But having said all of that, to kind of get an easy segue into the conversation, I thought it would be best if we start with something which is fresh, hot off the press, and talk about your brand new release, which has literally only just been announced. It's an interesting one because it's your first real bona fide entry into the library collection. It's Opus XIV Royal Tobacco, but it also isn't your first entry into the library collection, because this one here, Silver Oud, which you gave us a little while ago, has now moved into the library collection. Rose Incense, which wasn't technically one of your creations at all, has now gone into the library collection. So perhaps we'll talk about that and how you've created the library collection. But let's talk about Opus XIV Royal Tobacco, composed by Cécile Zarocchia. Lots of interesting things about it. But for me, one of the things that stayed the most prominently in my mind about it, from what you told me, is the story of somebody called El Lector. So I wondered if you could maybe start by telling us who El Lector was or is.
Yes, totally. And I might actually, let me just take a picture.
Take a picture. Oh, this is interesting.
Okay, just one sec.
I hope all of you watching can appreciate how stunning Renaud's office is. The way that those sort of shelves actually somehow echo the beautiful streamlined aesthetic of the brand. You had all of that behind you made especially for you. Oh, hang on, El Lector. Oh yeah.
So,
Okay, let me go full screen.
okay, so this is El Lector, and it's indeed one of the starting point actually of the work that we have done on Royal Tobacco. So who is this person, El Lector? He's actually standing high in a Cuban cigar factory. And I was actually looking for inspiration to work around this idea of a genuine tobacco fragrance. And I was actually consulting imagery of tobacco factories in Cuba. And I noticed that there was always this, a lady or a gentleman standing a little bit higher than everyone else, and usually reading books. So I was wondering what is going on. And I did some research. I found a book called El Lector, that tells actually the story of readers in cigar factories in Cuba. And to make a long story short, back a few decades ago, I think factory workers were getting a little bit bored of rolling cigars for the entire day. They decided to take one of the workers actually and tell the person, well, you're not going to be rolling cigars anymore. You're going to read for all of us. And at the end of the week, if we really appreciate what you've done and so on, we will give you part of our salary. And that's how you're going to make a living. Apparently, it was quite successful. People really enjoyed it. Everyone was happy about it. And the lectors became more and more professional. And the productivity and the happiness of the workers was increasing, but also their knowledge was increasing. They were getting really passionate about literature. The readers were reading books that were more complex every time and so on. And actually, that's when, I started connecting the dots. Because if you're a bit familiar with the world of cigars, you might know that there are some brands that are called Monte Cristo, Romeo and Julieta, and so on. And I realized actually those were the favorite books of the factories. So, and that's how they started actually naming cigars and brands after those books. But then what happened is at some point in time, the lectors but also the workers became too educated in a way. They started to question their condition. So they went on strike and so on because they really became educated actually through this. And it did not make actually the factory owners happy. So they decided to remove the lectors from the factories. But then they realized that the productivity was decreasing. So ultimately, they had the idea to hire the lectors themselves, but to use them for propaganda. And so that defeated the entire purpose of where it started. And then obviously radio arrived, television, internet, and so on. And the lectors became less and less of a thing until recently, I think a few years ago, I read several articles actually about lectors coming back to the factories because really it seems like people really appreciate, having a book read and so on. So that is the story. That was one of the inspirations behind Royal Tobacco. And that's how it connects actually the work that you have done on Royal Tobacco with knowledge and the importance of spoken literature, people reading books and so on, because knowledge is really, the fil rouge of the library collection. Library collection is inspired by the omniscient allure of the library, by books and so on, and every single fragrance in the library collection is actually telling a story about knowledge.
That's so. Well, thank you for telling that story so beautifully and so succinctly. Because I remember, I understand why it stayed with me now for all of these weeks since you first told it to me. Because it does feel like one of those stories that was just desperately waiting for somebody to pick it up and to discover it, and how great that actually you somehow turned it into a perfume. Now, I was just told by you a few minutes ago that I'm actually one of the very, very few people to have a few drops of Opus 14 Royal Tobacco, which you were very kind enough to give me several weeks ago when I visited Muscat. So tell us then how this story and how the idea of the world of El Lector then turned into this project with you and Cecile. And I'm going to spray some, and I will, on this occasion, allow myself to be very, very partial. I've forgotten now. And so, oh, this is so, sorry. This is really good. Anyway, I'm going to be quiet. I'll shut up now. You tell us how this turned into a perfume, how a Lector turned into a perfume.
So and you know, credit goes to Cecile, because she's you know, I think we really enjoy working together, because we build things in a way that's very organic and so on. So the way we started working on this fragrance, actually, as I mentioned, I wanted to work on a proper tobacco fragrance. So, and you might know, Darish, that there are several Amouage fragrances that have tobacco notes, you know. If you think about Journeyman, Sunshine Woman, but also Boundless. So all of these contain tobacco notes. However, they might not be tobacco dominant. And in this case, the goal was really for us to start from the ingredient. And from a very, very strong accord, and I'm going to talk about that accord specifically. So we started with tobacco, and we smelled like we always do, or like we very frequently do with Cecile. We start by smelling different qualities of the ingredient that we have in mind. So we smelled different tobacco absolutes. We selected one, and at that time, I realized that I was a little bit, I would not say disappointed, but that it did not really click in my mind. And I'm going to explain why. I just need to take something else. Give me.
Oh, go for it. Go for it. I'm just re-smelling this, and I'm just going to tell you, watching, but I'm struck again by how, and maybe you will talk about this, but I'm struck about how the tobacco almost also seems to come with a kind of licorice
That's
facet.
correct. So,
but what have you brought? Hang on, we need to make you full screen again. So
okay. So I brought a box. You know, there is like a football player sticker on it and so on. And then if you open it, you know, you see like some drawing of kids and so on. So this is actually a box that was given to me by my grandfather when I was probably, so it's World Cup 94. So I was 10.
wow.
And so he gave me this box. He was smoking cigars. He gave me this box because just to put my pencils in it. And I used it, and I was putting my pencils in it. And I recall actually loving the scent of it, and the scent is still there. So I think the way I would describe the scent is it's the smell of cigars, not probably only of tobacco, but really cigars and woods. And that scent actually remained, you know, in the back of my mind for many years. And that's really what I had in mind. Like at least that's how I think that Cuban factories smell, because I've never been to Cuba, but that's the idea that I have of it. So I smelled with Cecile Tobacco Absolute, and we smelled obviously, you know, tobacco leaves and stuff like that. And the smell is quite different from that memory, because I think it's just one facet of it. And I found it quite cold and maybe not as nuanced as what I had in mind, or as complex, you know, as what I had in mind. So then I ended up doing quite some research about cigars and how cigar lovers describe actually cigars. And you know, they would say, well, like before burning the cigar, this is what you smell. So they would smell the cigar before burning it. Then they would say, well, when you light the cigar, this is what you get. This is the first third. This is the second third. This is the third, the last third. So pretty much like fragrances in a way. So I was like, okay. And then I was reading the notes that they often described, and you see very frequently, you know, like notes that they categorize as cold notes or hot notes, fruity notes, but most of the time dried fruits, and also you know, like things like molasses and you know, elements that somehow I connect to fragrances a little bit. So the first thing was obviously, so the starting point was tobacco, but it had to be an Amouage tobacco. And Cécile came up with the idea to actually link Oman and Cuba through an accord, frankincense, royal frankincense, and tobacco absolute. So the two of them together, and that's why we have the name, so royal tobacco, from royal frankincense and tobacco absolute. Then what I realized afterwards, so that's a little bit for the story, but Muscat and Cuba are exactly on the same latitude. So it's 23 degrees north. So it's literally like the story became like, oh, like this is an accord that unites those two places in the world along the 23rd parallel north. So that, and in my mind, you know, those two ingredients coming together, they become the unique accord of the fragrance, and they are like the backbone of it. Because of their verticality, they are a little bit like, you know, like smoke, and they really are going to actually show and reveal their complexity through the entire evolution of the fragrance. And every single other ingredient that we have added with Cécile is there actually to complement and to reveal facets of this backbone of the fragrance. So I talked about,
this is like the perfect perfume story.
Well, it's you know, it's a lot of time thinking about it and really trying to put the pieces of the puzzle in mind. So now what do we have in the fragrance? So it was always, every time Cécile was moving the fragrance, the discussion was always, it's too hot or it's too cold, you know, like, because you want to get the right feeling of, and cold is good because it gives vibration and it gives a lot of verticality and so on. And hot is good because it gives patina, it gives, you know, it gives something substantial and round and pleasant and so on, but you don't want too much of it, because then it might not be, you know, that fragrance that I really wanted, quite vertical and quite vibrant and so on. So we start with the top notes. You smell, I think when you spray, you know, you smell quite some green notes, you know, like aromatic notes. We have, you know, we have, what do we have? Elemi, we have bergamot, we have cardamom a little bit, we have anise and basil, so quite green, and it creates quite a lot of vibration and so on. And then quite quickly, so you see a note of prunelle, so like dried plum in a way, and it goes back again to, we felt like
you mean as in the famous prunelle base?
Yes, but this is not the famous prunelle base, but this is something that Cécile created, that is really, I mean, I think a reference to it, and it's something that smells, I believe, like dried plum, quite, you know, in a way, I think that I wanted a fruity facet to that fragrance, but I wanted the least fruity facet possible. So something that would be quite dark, quite dry, and plum usually. I mean, you have also several plum notes in Amouage fragrances. So I quite like that. Then you have licorice that is quite obvious. It's one of the keynotes, I think, of the fragrance. again, lots of discussion about licorice. The role of licorice is probably there to bring a touch of sweetness, but that is more suggested than it's, than, I don't know, than an overload of sticky sweetness or something like that. And probably the reason why I think our brain associated with sweetness is that, so this is licorice root. It's not like the black licorice roll, so it's relatively woody and dry compared to it, and quite like elevated. But I think also it's because it's more suggested than something else, because it brings back memories of those licorice roots that you might have been chewing when you were a kid or something like that. So it's there and it's quite present, and I think it's quite well balanced with fenugreek as well, and which really like creates again this duality. And then you go into the woods and all of that. So
Renaud, we could talk for the whole hour about Opus 14 because the amount of thought that you put into it, and also how you're able to describe it, is amazing. But I will ask one question about it, and then we'll sort of move on to something else. And this is actually a question that was sent in by somebody who wanted to stay anonymous, though, and they have said, "Royal Tobacco, what a surprising choice of name. With Amouage, we're used to crossing the mountains of Jebel Akhdar and its fresh roses, or traveling through the Salalah desert and its incense trees, or going into oriental spices. But a tobacco, aren't you scared that with a name like that, we associate the fragrance with the scent of cigarettes or cigars in a society that pushes for the consumption of biodiversity?" And I think by that they mean that maybe going into sort of more healthier directions. Are you worried about the association with cigarettes or cigars? Not my question.
It's a very good one, and to be honest, I mean, personally, I'm not a smoker, but for some reason, I think when I smell tobacco, and for me, I see that really as a fragrance ingredient, and my intention is really not to, to give an alternative to cigarette or to cigars or something like that. For me, it's really I'm seeing this, I'm seeing those leaves here, and I'm for me, I mean, it's just like a beautiful natural product that has actually an exquisite smell when it's treated, as part of a fragrance composition and so on. But I mean, unless you disagree, I don't think that it smells, like cigarette or like something, that I would consider,
Well, this is not a context in which I disagree with you, Renaud, but no, I think that's a completely fair answer to the question. Now, people will be able to smell Opus 14 for themselves very, very soon. I had a quick look at the Amouage website just before we started, and I think people can already sign up for a kind of pre-order. So please discover it for yourselves. But I think now let's kind of put that one aside for a little bit. I said at the very beginning that you've been busy in your still relatively fairly brief time at Amouage, and you have actually been extremely busy, because when I look at some of the list of some of the things that you've already done, and I'm sure there are lots of things that we're not even aware of, but these are the sort of very obvious public things. So you've gone away from the old style of naming, which was that we always had something man, something woman for the main releases. You've put the names on the fronts of the bottles. You've given us a new Amouage logo, which we can just about see here, whereas here we've still got the old logo. You've with the in terms of the creative direction and with the actual releases, I think it would be fair to say that you've gone forward and given us brand new things, but you've also gone backwards. And you've also kind of gone sideways, because you've given us flankers, which we never had before from Amouage, but you've also gone and done these things like the exceptional extrays, which we may have a chance to talk about, where you've taken some perfumes from the past which already had extrays, but you've given us slightly different extrays on them. You've given us attars quite recently. You've done some seeming discontinuations. Maybe they're discontinuations, maybe they're not, with the recurating of the library collection. You've brought in the work of other artists and other individuals, but in a fairly high-profile way. You've also started the process of changing the look of the retail space. Again, when I was in Muscat, I was very fortunate to be there for the opening of the flagship Amouage boutique at one of the shopping malls in Muscat. A very, very striking design. I posted it on social media because I think it's kind of safe to say that it's like a perfume shop that doesn't look like a perfume shop. It looks like a kind of sci-fi installation that's, landed from the other side of Mars. So lots and lots of things have been happening. You've been doing lots of things. Where are we at then in terms of the Renaud Salmon vision? Is this really just the beginning, or are we kind of like halfway into it? Give us a kind of insight into that idea-filled brain.
Well, it's a good question, Darius. And I guess when we had the discussion 2 years ago, if I recall well, we talked really about, like, am I going to reboot Amouage, or am I going to trash like what was done before, or something like that? And back at the time, I said, actually, that's not my intention at all. I think, I believe that, change needs to be taken like carefully and so on. And change is good when you fully understand the past and what, really makes the uniqueness of Amouage. However, as you have mentioned, when I look backwards now, I see that I actually operated lots of changes, even if I don't have the feeling that, it was so drastic in a way. So, and change is required. If you, I think if you want to remain relevant, and if you want to keep people excited about something, yes, you might actually proceed with some changes that are, that might not be popular with some people and so on, but other people might actually be convinced about it. And again, I'm trying to propose something that I think, one, is respectful of the past. Two, I think is extremely respectful of the technicality and the artistry of perfumery. That's really something I care about. And then ultimately, it's a question of creative decisions and creative direction. And that, is very personal. So for me, what really matters is that the substance behind my creative decision, so everything that is technical, everything that is about artistry and so on, needs to be extremely elevated. I need to be very demanding, and everything needs really like to be as elevated as possible. And then when it comes to the aesthetics and the choices and so on, I think it's quite personal. However, I think it's very informed by what I'm experiencing in Oman. And the more the more time I spend in Oman, the more, I feel confident about pushing some things. And the more actually, I think the country, so Oman, but the world is ready for I think, quite a contemporary take on the majestic beauty of Oman, if that makes sense.
Well, let's go into that actually, because I wanted to spend a bit of time talking about Oman. Now that you've been there for a while and you have traveled extensively in Oman, as we can see from your Instagram, would you be able to express what you think is the Omani aesthetic, whatever that might be? What is that?
So, it's quite interesting. So the first thing that, you realize when you're not familiar with the GCC region is that each country of the region is quite different. And I guess, some people have this impression that, well, the whole region is pretty much the same thing, but you're familiar, with the differences of between the countries. And so that's, for me, one thing that defines Oman, is that actually Oman is not Dubai. And it's quite different in its take on richness. So in a way, I think the entire region is about richness, but then the take on richness is quite different. So Oman has a very, very, I think, genuine and authentic take on richness that is built on a lot of history, that is built on striking and beautiful nature, and that is built also on values of the people that are, that are based on concepts like, open privacy, that are based on concepts of hospitality and so on, that are extremely important. Now, would like to connect that as well to, I think the vision of His late Majesty Sultan Qaboos, so the previous ruler of Oman, who, I really recently realized that he was actually an example of someone who was a true lover of beauty and of art, and who really believed that art and beauty in general could have actually a major impact on the well-being of a country. And I think this philosophy is really infused in Amouage. That's, it was born actually from that vision to really, back in 1983, to actually spread this wave of love for beautiful perfumery. And for me, so this really defines Oman. And it's
putting perfume aside, putting Amouage aside, I should say, not perfume, but putting Amouage aside, is there some kind of Omani cultural product? So be it a piece of architecture, or a piece, another piece of art, or even some kind of an item of clothing that to you really sums up the Omani aesthetic? Is there like a kind of reference point for you?
I mean, I think the Grand Mosque or the Royal Opera House are two pieces actually of architecture that represent really Oman. And I'll give you an example. If when you visit, you did visit, visit the Grand
Mosque.
Yes.
I visited the mosque, but not the Opera House. Yes.
Yeah. So the mosque is built actually with limestone and travertine, and not that much marble, for example. And then I was talking to some people about why, that decision of materials, and really their philosophy is, well, there is actually this desire to use materials that have a soul, that are not, like cold and frozen like marble and so on. It's not about having like the most expensive stone or something like that. It's really about finding the stone that represents the solarity, the positivity, and the authenticity of Oman. And ultimately, that mosque, I mean, I think you'll probably agree with me. It's stunning. It's extremely and it's extremely touching because obviously it's grand and it's very rich and so on, but it does not leave you cold, because you can really feel the soul of it in a way. And I think it represents really what Oman is all about.
And your experience of Oman obviously is much more extensive than mine. But having been there for a few days, yes, the Grand Mosque is something that I took away with me as being an interesting symbol, but also an interesting contrast with some of the other sort of similarly grand mosques in the region. That the points of similarity and the points of difference are interesting. Oman, I think it would be fair to say as well, is quite a proud nation, but as many nations are. We've talked over the years a few times about this process that is called Omanization or Omanization, which is a completely made up word, but essentially, correct me if I'm wrong, what it means is that if there is a position of employment going, if there is a job going or something like that, then the preference is usually for that job, if possible, to go to an Omani national, because it upskills the nation, and it means that the first choice of jobs is going to the local population. Clearly, in your case, that didn't happen because you're Belgian. But I know that you also told me that there was a moment at the beginning of your post when you had some very serious moments of doubts, where you thought, oh, was this a good idea? Maybe I'm not the right guy for this. Maybe they should have chosen an Omani person for that. So tell us a little bit about that and how you kind of came to terms with thinking that actually you are the right guy for the job.
Well, and actually, I think I really felt that tension when I realized that I wanted actually to push the fact that, you know, Amouage comes from Oman, and Amouage is Oman, instead of saying, hey, actually, I'm going to take a very international take on Amouage, and I'm going to take my distances actually from the country and so on. So when I realized that the right thing to do would be to really, you know, take inspiration and references and so on from Oman, that's actually when I think I became aware of the potential risk of, you know, of not being true to the country, because who am I to say that, you know, I understand Oman? Who am I to you know, to be able to create something that's supposed to represent a country that where I was not born? So
Well, was there? Sorry to interrupt, but was there a moment when you felt accepted by the nation in a way?
I think I've always felt very welcome, like since the, you know, since the beginning. So Amouage is a privately owned company by a family, and the family was extremely supportive, and everyone, all of the employees, most of the employees are Omani at Amouage, and all of them have always been extremely, you know, extremely nice to me. So I think I've always felt welcomed, but maybe at the beginning I was really feeling that I was potentially walking on eggs in a way. So what happened is the following. Well, I think, you know, it's really about finding the right balance. So between like the references to the country and so on, but also some international inspiration. So that's why I decided really to build my teams, you know, with quite some Omani people, but also some international talents. And I think there is really like a very good dynamic going on from that point of view. I realized that there are actually incredibly talented people in Oman, and so in a way, I think there is really like, I mean, there is a strong rationale behind the idea of trying to keep those talents in Oman, because the country, I think, needs its talents, and so in a way, I think the mindset and the philosophy behind it is the right one. So we are building really, you know, the future of Amouage, trying to you know, to train the young talents of the country. I'm really impressed by some of them.
And there is a kind of in-house perfumer with a very specific role who is Omani, right?
Totally. And I think the one thing they miss is proper, you know, technical international training. So today, you know, none of them are able to meet IFRA compliance, for example, with their creations. But, you know, you might be familiar with attars like Homage and Tribute and so on. All of them were created by Omani perfumers. However, because they are not trained in international perfumery schools, to meet international requirements, those creations actually, I think they don't, you know, they don't get the light they deserve, because we are only able to sell them in Oman.
Yeah, I can't believe how quickly the time is going, and we've already got questions from other people. So for those of you watching live, you are watching Love at First Scent with me, Persolaise, and we have in the virtual studio today, very special guest, Renaud Salmon, the creative director at Amouage, coming to us live from Muscat, where it's raining. Is it still raining?
More or less, yeah.
Kind of. Okay. Do start sending in some questions. I mean, the list of questions that I've got is insanely long. I want to stay on the subject of your location for a little bit, because now, correct me if I'm wrong, your office is upstairs. As soon as you arrive at the Amouage factory, one of the first things that you see, if you know what to look, I didn't recognize it, is you see a frankincense tree. Then you kind of go underneath the sort of wavy ceilinged walkway, and then when you enter the building, the first thing that you're presented with is essentially like a kind of history lesson, because you're taken through the entire history of Amouage in bottles. There's also a beautiful boutique there. But then also what you see open to everybody because it's behind, you know, glass walls, is the huge metal vats where the concentrate is doing its thing. You see the people packing the bottles into the boxes and doing the wrapping. And I still have a very, very, very clear memory of just the excitement on your face when you were showing me around this place, because you said that this was unique for you in the sense that you could just come downstairs from your office upstairs and see all of this stuff being done. So is that actually part of the inspiration for you? Is that part of what creates ideas? You know, this feeling that you're in this entire hub where you can literally just go downstairs and see, you know, gold man being macerated or whatever.
Totally, and you know, I think that's when it all comes together, because we talked about the importance of Oman. You did not mention it, but you know, when I arrived, actually, Amouage was not only producing in Oman. Amouage, as you know, had also made in UK products, and now, you know, everything is every single product comes out of Oman. Every single perfume product is made in Oman. It makes a huge difference because it's really like it's you know, I have one full overview of everything that is going on. It's very tangible. It's very pragmatic. You know, I go down, I smell. It gives us also the possibility to do very complex protocols that you could not do if you were producing in different locations and so on, because you know, as you might know, the exceptional extraits are aged for up to 6 months. It requires actually quite some constant monitoring and so on. So I mean, I find it really exciting to be able to create for a house like Amouage, where everything is so tangible and where everything is so connected in a way, and where I can really envision and get a clear understanding, you know, of like what we produce, when, how many bottles, and all of that. I find it really
it all felt very, very human as well, because I think literally on every single one of those containers there's a handwritten label that says, you know, this is this perfume, you know, this is material, this is boundless. And I believe you still also have the very, very first one, haven't you?
Yeah, it's still there. I mentioned, you know, that it's going into retirement. So that tank is a little bit small these days. So we are moving.
But is that for gold? Is that for what we now call Gold Woman?
Yes, correct. But that tank is a little bit small. So it's probably going to retire and end up in the museum part of the factory. But yeah, it's still there. So you definitely see, as you walk there, 40 years of history.
Yes, and did you encompass it in one go? And also, am I right in remembering that usually the packaging tends to be done by women, and that there was like a sort of maybe a kind of specific reason for that?
I mean, I don't know if there is a specific reason, but when you're mentioning it, it's true that the shield of every single bottle.
Oh, that's right. Yes, because sorry, I should tell people every single one of these shields is individually stuck on, isn't it?
Yeah, and what is really interesting, you know, I come from...
Or by hand, I should say. Obviously, they're individually stuck on, but I mean by hand, yeah.
Because, you know, I come from a background where products were manufactured in a much bigger scale. And usually, you know, you would always have like what we call an orientation lug, which allows actually a machine to just like rotate an element. And then once it clicks, then actually it's aligned and so on. And here, if you look from behind in a transparent Amouage bottle or something like that, you realize that there is nothing. So every single element is literally aligned by, and it could only be aligned by a human being, I guess. So it's really, I mean, that's the beauty of it, you know. And then I was quite, you know, blown away when I started talking with the people doing that, because my assumption was, well, probably those people want to do something else because they've been doing it for a while and so on. So maybe they want to be promoted, or maybe they want to change a little bit and so on. And actually, I was quite surprised, because those and you're right, they're all ladies doing that specific actually manipulation. They were telling me that they are extremely proud to be given this immense responsibility to actually glue that element that everyone is going to see around the world, and they take a particular pride to have only 0.1% reject rate, which is which is really which means that they are doing an excellent job, and that they are the pride of the country in a way. So I think it's a beautiful philosophy. It's a company, where people have been working for decades, and I'm there to serve that vision in a way.
Well, a little bird, and it wasn't you. A little bird told me that maybe or maybe not, the reason why it tends to be the women who do it was because when the men were asked to do it, they didn't do a very good job. But I don't know how true that is. I've got to take this question from Joanne. Oh, sorry, wrong one, because it's a good question. She's saying, is there a lector reading to the women, sticking the logos on the bottles?
Well, you know what, Darius? Actually, I've been pushing to try that experiment.
Oh,
so
wow. Okay.
we are going to produce Royal Tobacco, because the product just finished aging, so just finished maceration. It's going to be available on the 19th. So between now and the 19th, we are going to produce. So we are going to put the final fragrance in the bottles. And the intention, I need to check if it's still happening and so on, is to actually have a very talented Arabic reader who is going to read when we produce Royal Tobacco, beautiful Arabic literature to the entire production floors. And of course, I'll try to take pictures and to tell the story and so on. But I'm curious to see, if people are reacting to the experiment. And apparently, if it's like cigars, whatever the person is reading is going to be felt a little bit in the final product. So if you feel that Royal Tobacco is a little bit romantic, or is a little bit, I don't know, chaotic or something like that, there might be because of the book that was read.
Oh, choose some beautiful poetry then. How wonderful. You have to tell us how that goes. A question from Yura, which kind of relates to what I wanted to ask. I was going to say to you, have you got a particularly favorite Omani dish that now you like to eat? Yura is saying, do you like halwa? And if so, will we get an Amouage gourmand?
Yeah, and this one is an interesting one, because, to be honest, that's one of the, probably the most straightforward and obvious source of inspiration. Okay, let's take everything from food and so on that is obviously Oman, and let's try to turn that into a fragrance that is more or less literal. And so far, I must say that I contemplated the idea of halwa and so on. So far, I find it a bit of an easy route. So I find that a bit too literal and probably a little bit too expected, if that makes sense. But there might be a way around it, I'm still waiting to be, because I think, when I see some of those ideas, and it's okay, you're going to get a bit of coffee, a bit of cardamom, something slightly sweet, a little bit of rose, and a little bit of saffron and spices. I feel that we go into a territory that is a little bit too much of a caricature of what you could expect from something coming out of Oman.
Interesting. And do you like halwa?
I do. I love it.
And do you have a favorite Omani dish to eat?
I like shua. Yes. So I like everything that has been cooked, for a while. I love, when I see those people cooking lamb for underground for I don't know, 12 hours one day or something, and then ultimately what you get is actually a product that has been completely transformed, and I quite like that. So yeah.
Okay, cool. A question from Iris Hedonist, who says, did the Amouage customers, or have the Amouage customers changed with this new branding and collection? If they haven't changed, what are they now saying about the brand? Or if they have changed, who is the new customer?
Well, it's a good one, and I don't know. Like I'm probably not. I mean, I'm not like fully aware of everyone who's buying Amouage. However, what I can say is the following. I think definitely, one of my intention with like what you see the work on, the contemporary feel of the art that I'm trying to to propose, and the art direction and so on. I feel like my gut feeling is that it's probably appealing to people with a who appreciate, a different take on richness, who are able actually to appreciate the fact that if I take, this is, for example, Opus 5. Well, Opus 5 contains, mostly like these elements of gold. And you might look at it and you might think, well, that's not the kind of richness I'm expecting from Amouage and so on. But I believe that, richness also comes from contrast. And richness is not only about like an overload of gold and all of that. I think it's really about, okay, being able to highlight, what you're after and to make it extremely strong. And it's also valid probably for the fragrances that I'm working on and so on. So, to go back to the question, I think, yes, it's probably appealing to different clients. But what makes me happy is, when I read sometimes, or when I have people writing to me saying, hey, you know what, actually I've been a loyal client of Amouage for years. And I have to say, I was a little bit, I don't know, I did not know what to expect from the change. But now that I'm looking at it and so on, I have to say that I'm enjoying it. And actually, I have to say that I enjoy the artistry, and yes, the creative take on it is different. However, what makes Amouage, what makes the uniqueness of Amouage is obviously still there. And I hope that I can actually push the quality even more, and that I can push the uniqueness even more. And we were there, we talked about the sourcing of ingredients. We talked about many things that I think were maybe a little bit lost as Amouage was growing fast in the past decade. And now is the right time to really like bring back the focus on all of that. So
Thank you. One final question I wanted to ask about your setting again, because I found this absolutely fascinating. And again, you don't really realize this unless you go there. You are basically kind of just like diagonally across the corridor from your CEO. And on your floor, there are a few other offices. But your CEO had the very, very interesting and I think very wise idea of keeping all of the creative side of things in Muscat, where you are now, but then making an office in Dubai, where he put all of the people who are more interested in things like marketing and all of that horrible stuff like money. So with absolutely no disrespect to your colleagues in Dubai, has it been helpful having them a little bit away so that they can't come knocking on your door every 30 seconds and then you have the space to do your creative thing?
I think this is really brilliant, because, and it makes total sense. I mean, first of all, when you are a creative, I think it's really important to have the support of your CEO, and when actually a CEO is able to protect the creatives, and to give them the time to think, to reflect, and really, the time it takes to create beautiful fragrances, it makes such a difference. So I'm extremely actually grateful for that, because I'm able to sit here, I'm able to welcome perfumers and so on, and it's really, I mean, in his mind, Muscat should be like a sanctuary, something you protect, something that should remain as untouched as possible. And it's obviously, as you said, the creation, but it's also the production. And then on the other hand, having the sales team in a very buzzy like location where things are happening, where everything is connected, where the e-commerce team can run and can serve actually better and faster like all of the orders that we are getting around the world and so on. I think it makes total sense, and yeah, I think it's really part of probably the success of Amouage today.
No, I thought it was a very, very astute thing to do. Renaud, I can't thank you enough for this first hour, and I can't believe that it has almost been an hour. I mean, if you could see how many questions I've got in front of me that I could potentially ask. So thank goodness that you have said yes to a second hour, which we will almost certainly be on the 16th of July, Saturday, the 16th of July. I should end by saying Eid Mubarak to you, and Eid Mubarak to everybody at Amouage and everybody around the world who celebrates Eid. Have you got any interesting plans for Eid? Are you going to be traveling off somewhere into some beautiful landscape?
I think I'm going to Masira, and Masira is an island on the east coast of Oman. It takes like 5 hours to drive there from Muscat. Then you put the car on a boat, and then you cross actually the sea, and then you land on the island. And that island is going to have a role to play in the future of Amouage. More to come.
Fantastic. So we expect some more beautiful photographs on your Instagram. So this isn't goodbye for the moment. This is à bientôt. We will see you in just over a week's time. A huge, huge thank you to everybody for watching. I have made a note of the questions that I haven't been able to ask today, I promise. But as you can see, there is a lot to talk about with this really quite unique brand. Thank you very much for your time, Renaud. Have a good Eid break, and we will see you soon.
Thank you, Darius. Thank you, everyone.